Okay, hi. Here we are again. Thank you so much for coming back. Um, this is, I just got to notice that our internet is slow. Hopefully it'll still be okay. This is the class number 5 out of 7 for um, caregiving for dementia. So thank you so much for coming back. Um, so this class is titled Timeline No Fear. And what we're going to be doing in this class is we're going to be a little bold and a little courageous, and we're going to be looking into the future, which can be scary when you're caregiving for someone with dementia. But I hope that through this course you will feel actually more relaxed after having had this chat and feel more in control and more comfortable with the future of for your loved one and of course for yourself. So, talking about dying, talking about end of life is not something that we do a lot in our culture, and in a lot of ways we miss out because we don't have it around us. We don't see it. We've pushed it to the side. It's hidden. Aging is hidden as well, and then of course dementia is hidden, although it's becoming more visible as more people talk about it. But in general, in our culture, we might not see a lot of aging and of sickness and of dying, certainly. And so that only causes us to feel even more anxious about it because we don't know. We don't know what to expect. We don't know how to talk about it, even if we want to talk about it. We don't know how to bring it up with our loved ones, or maybe we want to bring it up, but they don't want to hear about it. And there's, different levels of comfort talking about these things, these topics. And yet, if we don't talk about them, then what happens is we have to handle all of the emotions, all of the decisions, all of the processing in the moments of crisis, in the moments of passing, in the moments of transition. And that creates a lot of stress. It can also lead to maybe making decisions or choices that we wish we hadn't, or we wish we'd been able to do it in a different way. And it makes us potentially lose an opportunity to, sorry about that, to have a meaningful time with our loved one. Even either at the time of death or even in the last few months before death, or even earlier. If we have an understanding of what our priorities are and what our values are around death and dying, if we've had conversations around those important topics, not only are we going to feel, hopefully, more relaxed and less fear, but we will also hopefully know more about our loved ones' wishes and feel comfortable that we can support them and know what they want when things do occur. So we can enjoy the time that we have, not worrying about it. So this is very much tied into my key of preparation, and my key word for that category is relaxation, because this is something that can be just kind of causing us some uneasiness underneath the surface. Even if we're not conscious about it, it's kind of there all the time bothering us. But once we've talked about it, once we've thought about it, and we've actually taken care of maybe preparing some documents or writing some things down or having a conversation, we can relax, right? We can relax. So we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit today. I'm going to invite some conversation, and we're also going to talk about some practical things. We're going to talk about language, like what is palliative care versus hospice care? What is an advanced care plan? And how do you go about doing that? When should you do it? And then we're also going to talk specifically about how are all of these questions a little bit different when we are working with someone who has dementia. So I'll share a little bit about my experience with that as well. So what I'm going to do again, trying this to share my screen here. So here we have our timeline, no fear. And, oops, I think I didn't do that right. There we go. There we go. Timeline, no fear. So here we have our crystal ball, right? So we're going to be looking into the future. And, you know, we all wish we could see into the future, perhaps, so we would know exactly what was going to happen and when it was going to happen, and we could prepare ourselves. But of course, life isn't like that. We get to be surprised. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties today. But you know, life isn't like that. We get to be surprised. We get to figure it out as we go along. But today we are going to be bold, and we're going to look into the future. And although that can be scary, it can also be really beneficial because it can help us to focus on what's important, right? So, you know, I have a bit of a Buddhist training, and one of the things with Buddhism is it really values talking about and thinking about the end of life. And so why is that? Why is it helpful? What are the benefits of talking about the end of life? So I just want to bring this up as we go into this topic, because we can then hold these things and remember this is why we're here. This is why we're going to have these conversations. So, of course, when we think about the end of life, it can help us to realize what's important in our life and help give our current life meaning. Because if we're going through our day and we're valuing each moment and we're taking advantage of our life, we're going to hopefully be making choices that are meaningful for us. We're going to be kind, we're going to be bold, and we're going to live in a way that's valuable, because we know that life is precious and it doesn't last forever. And that's because we're aware of death. We're not denying it. We're aware of it. So that's a benefit. It helps us to connect with people, helps us to connect with loved ones, and it helps us to respect their wishes. Also helps us to teach children, right? Eventually we're going to die. We want others to be able to be comfortable with that and care for us and talk with us and know our wishes and honor them. But if we haven't taught them how to do that, they won't know how to do it. So we need to model that behavior. And of course, the more that we talk about these things, the more we're going to dispel the fears. So much of our fears around death and dying come from the fact that we don't talk about it, and it's invisible and it's unknown, and that's scary. You know, I like to share the story that I lived in Costa Rica for a few months, and the culture there is very different around death and dying. It's very much a part of their culture. When someone dies, they're automatically, the family of the one who passed, they don't leave their house for 8 days. The body is brought into the house, and all of the friends and the neighbors come to the house to pay respects. So if you're a child growing up in that culture, you've seen this a lot. They've gone to many, many houses, whether it's a friend or a neighbor. You've been going to houses when somebody has died. You know what the drill is. You've seen it many times by the time you're an adult. And then once you're an adult and you have your own family and you have a death in your family, you also know what to do. There's a structure in place. There's a common ritual. So in addition, they also have their funeral services that go through the streets and parade through the streets and go right past people's houses. And so there was hardly, I think, any weekend where I didn't see a parade in one of the streets somewhere of a funeral. And so again, you're seeing it around, so that by the time you grow up, you're like, yeah, there's birth, there's death, there's birth, there's death. It's part of life. I think that we've made it a lot harder for ourselves because we've removed so much of that contact and made it so invisible. So, but the more we talk about it, the more we're going to dispel those fears. And then last, of course, is just generally being prepared. So the more that we think about these things and talk about them and think about what are the different scenarios and how do I feel about them, we're going to be prepared so that when those moments come, we've already thought about how we're going to handle it, what's important, We already understand what our loved ones' wishes are, and we're able to abide by them. It takes a lot of stress out of the situation, you know. So I will share, I guess, you know, when my mom passed, I was the one that I kind of felt like I should know what to do because I teach these classes, and and I did up to a point, but I was still, it was very emotional, of course, and I realized I hadn't thought through everything. And although I had my prayers and I did, you know, I was with her and we, you know, I was by her bedside right after she passed, and you know, did some things that I wanted to do. Then I didn't know what to do after that. And you know, people came in and they took her body, and I was like, wait, what? I don't, do I want, should the body be going now, or should I be going with the body? You know, I didn't know what to do. So um, I hope that that's okay for me to share that with you. I don't want to cause fear. I want to share my story in order for you to learn from it, and hopefully for you to be able to share your story as well. Um, you know, it was just surprising to me that even though I had been talking about it as much as I had, still when I got into the moment, I didn't know what to do. I had that, oh, wait, I don't know what to do. So it just showed me that I needed to talk about it even more. You know, I needed to think about it even more than I had. So that's my invitation to you. Okay, so we're going to dive in a little bit here. And I'm going to ask the question, what is a good death? Okay, so I'm going to put some things up here that people have said that this is what a good death would be. If they've had a long life, that would be a good death. They've had a long life and then they die, that's a good death. If they don't have much pain, that's a good death. If it's not expensive, not complex situation, that's a good death. And if they have more time with loved ones, it's a good death. These are just some suggestions, just some things that I'm putting up there. And the real question is, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to you? You can just take a moment and just think about it. Now I'm going to offer, actually, let me see, I think I have it. Yeah. There's actually a game. And so, you know, sometimes we ask this question, well, what does it mean to you? And you're kind of like, oh, you don't even know where to begin. So this game, it's the Go Wish game, and actually I have a deck here, so I'll bring it back up to me for a second. So here's the Go Wish card game. And you can actually do this online as well, but they are actually physical cards, which is, I think, pretty fun. So I'll just kind of show you what they are. So it's a deck of cards. And on the back, they have a whole bunch of options. Let's see, don't you have the glare here? Can I do this without the glare? There we go. So there's a whole bunch of options. So, and I am not going to be able to read these backwards. So we have to maintain my dignity. Okay, so there's a card. To prevent arguments by making sure my family knows what I want. That's another card. To have my family prepared for my death. Okay, so they just have simple phrases. To have my funeral arrangements made. And so the idea is that you read a card and then you put it into a stack of, this is really important to me, this is not very important to me, or I'm neutral about this. So you have 3 different piles. And you know, when you first go through it, at least for me, you kind of put everything in. This is really important, you know, like this one, to be free of pain. Okay, that's important. To be free from anxiety. Well, that's important, you know. So you're kind of, but eventually you have to discriminate. You have to kind of prioritize. And then you take your most important stack and you put those in order of what's most important for you. And it's really helpful to be able to sort these, to have these prompts and to help you sort out what's important to you. it's also really helpful to have a conversation. Um, I was actually able to use this deck of cards with my mother when she was, I would say, in medium to advanced stage of dementia. So I wasn't sure if any of it was going to work, if she was going to understand me. And I don't know that she fully understood, but I did just, explain the game to her. And I said, is this really important to you or not so important to you to have, to be, whatever, read one of the cards. And then she would say, not important, or it's important. Or I would just look at her reaction and see like, she shrugged or whatever. And I'd say, okay, that's not so important. Um, and it was surprising because like one of the things that she said, I said, do you want to die at home? And she was like, no, doesn't matter, you know. And I was surprised. I didn't know that. And I said, do you want to have loved ones with you at the time of death? And she was like, I know, people are busy. My practical mother. And I was surprised. I didn't know that about her. And so that was the way that I use these cards. And, you can do it with your family if you're trying to think about your own wishes. It's a really fun way to see if you can guess what someone important to you might say and see if you know them well or not. So anyway, this is it's a nonprofit that develops these cards. It's called gowish.org, and you can order them online, but you also can just do it for free online. They have like a game on the computer, and so you can pull the cards on your computer screen and sort them that way too. So you don't have to actually purchase the cards, although I think it's fun to have the cards. So that's something. And you can also do it with a group. It's just kind of a way to start conversation that can be difficult. All right. So now I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. So what we're going to be talking about today, and this is kind of more relevant for dementia specifically, is we're going to be looking at the last 3 to 6 months. So this is true for anyone who's aging, but again, for someone who with dementia, we're more involved, I think, over a more prolonged period of time, or at least we're more consciously involved in the last period of time. And so what I wanted to say is a little bit of statistics here, that the average patient has 3 care transitions in the last 90 days of life. So in the last 3 months, they have 3 care transitions, meaning they move from one level of home to another level of home. They go from their home to a hospital. They go from a hospital to a skilled nursing facility. Any of those kinds of transitions. They have, on average, 3 of those in the last 90 days of life. So what this means is that in this period of time, in these last 90 days, there are a lot of things that are going on. And so what I like to really prepare people for, and you probably know this already, but I just think it's worth saying, is that you want to know that that's coming. And when you start to see the beginning of this period of time happening, if falls are starting to occur more often, UTIs are starting to occur more often, weight is falling more rapidly, if there's more hospital visits, if there's just a decline in independence, they're unable to feed themselves or whatever, right? Just kind of those kind of signals. If you see those things happening, then you can recognize that, and you can maybe start to clear your plate a little bit. Maybe start to prepare yourself to be more involved in the care, or be more have more emotions coming up for you, and maybe make sure that you have documents in order. and take care of things that you can in advance. You know, if you want to have a funeral arrangement, if you want to have an obituary written, if you want to have the contact list put together, you know, those kinds of things. Once you start to get into this period of time where that you know, last 3 to 6 months, you want to be prepared that, you know, there's just going to be more demands on you emotionally and physically. Okay, so I put this slide here, and I just want to invite you to breathe for a moment. But I think it's really interesting, and I find myself a little bit curious when I see this slide. So this is called the 4 ways to die, and you can see that we have sudden death, which would be an example of, you know, a heart attack or a car crash or something where you're going along and then you die. Terminal illness, where you may be going along pretty well for a long time, but then once it gets to a certain point, you decline rapidly and then you die. Organ failure is more of a little bit of a cyclical nature, but you are always returning to a lower point than you were before. So you're going along, you have an incident, you recover from that incident, but you're not as strong as you were before the incident. And then you go along, you have another incident, and you recover from that incident, but you're again a little bit lower, a little bit weaker than you were before the incident. And so you kind of continue on this kind of cyclical decline. And in a lot of ways, dementia falls into this category, right? It's not linear. We can go along, we can be doing pretty well, and then there can be an incident. Whether it's a fall or whether it's an illness or, you know, maybe a mini stroke or whatever, and then we can come back from that, but we're a little bit lower than we were before that incident. And then frailty is the last category, which is, you know, what I think people think of usually when they think of old age. They think, oh, we're just going to get more and more frail, and then we're going to die of old age. And that doesn't really happen that much anymore. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. The typical old age of frailty doesn't happen that much anymore. Frailty itself, the extension of it does happen because we are able to stay alive longer even if we're frail. So we have the medical intervention that's able to support us to live longer in a frail state. So that does occur. So I just put this up here again because there are different situations, and so when we talk about death and dying, we don't want to group it all together. You know, there's some different ways that we want to be thinking about it and preparing ourselves, and the emotion of it when we're experiencing it in different ways. One of the things that people talk about a lot with dementia is the grieving process, and how people can grieve very early on, you know, because they can feel loss very early on with dementia. And that's because we're going through this cycle where there can be a severe decline, and when they come back, even if they recover, they may not recover to a point where we can connect with them anymore, or where we can, you know, we can feel a loss there that's significant enough and it triggers grief for us. So even though they aren't gone, we can have grief at these different moments, and it can be quite prolonged because if dementia is being sustained for a long time, our grief can be as well. So it's good to know that and to be aware, like that's why this is happening. That's why I'm grieving over this 5-year period of time, you know, which is different than, you know, my friend who, you know, spouse had a, you know, heart attack and died, and, you know, she had a distinct moment of grief to begin. So that's okay. So now I wanted to talk about the difference between palliative and hospice care. It's something that a lot of people don't know about, and that is very relevant for all of us that are caregiving for dementia. If you don't know what these terms mean, you are not alone. 70% of Americans don't know what palliative care is. A lot of people have heard of hospice and they know it's about end of life, that's more common, but palliative care is still very unknown, and it is very relevant for us. So I'm going to go with quick definitions here. So palliative care is around comfort, is around supporting someone who without medication. So you're going to improve communication, less aggressive care, and it's going to result in fewer hospitalizations and less cost. So it's just additional support, helping to manage pain, manage symptoms, but without trying to cure the disease. So it's very relevant for dementia because hospice, which is in the last 6 months of life and is focused on comfort care and respecting the wishes of the dying, that may not be occurring for someone with dementia. We may not know if someone with dementia is in the last 6 months of life yet. You know, it's hard to say sometimes, but we would still benefit greatly from having the palliative support of having someone who can come in and, you know, provide music therapy, for example, or animal therapy, or just be another person to review the medication list and help to coordinate care and help to coordinate communication of all of the people on the medical team. It's a huge help, especially to us as caregivers, to have another person who is, you know, on our side. And that's palliative care. So it's definitely worth looking into if you haven't anybody talk to you about palliative care. They can often bring it in quite early on in the dementia process. So I truly invite you to look into that if you can. Okay, so I wanted to put this up. This is something you have probably heard about or encountered if you are on the dementia journey. This is the commonly referred to 7 stages of dementia. So I will just read them here. Stage 1 appears normal and is able to cover up lapses. Stage 2, they forget certain things, but they can otherwise function normally. Stage 3, there's difficulties at work. They can become anxious, and the family begins to become aware. Stage 4, they have reduced ability to count. They find travel difficult, and they can no longer manage their own affairs. Stage 5, they need help getting dressed. Stage 6, they need help eating, need help using the toilet. They may be incontinent. They can be disoriented in time and place, and they can't possibly forget who they are. Then stage 7 is severe speech loss, motor stiffness, incontinence, needs feeding, and total disorientation. So again, this isn't up here to cause you fear or anxiety. It is about being informed so that we can know what's coming, know what to expect, and start to think about that and be prepared and prepare ourselves. For example, if you have a loved one with dementia and they are, at stage 3 or 4, but you have been bold enough to come to this talk and you have looked at this list and you can see that stage 5 is they're going to need help getting dressed, and then the next stage they're going to need help with some of their daily activities. Then at this point you can start to think about how are you going to handle that? Will you be able to handle that with them living at home and bringing in care? Would you need to find care for them? Do you want them living with you? Do you, whatever. You can start to think about and explore the support that they will need at that point. And it's much better to be able to do that now and start to explore. And there are many wonderful options out there too. That's the other thing I really want to emphasize. There are amazing options and they're increasing all of the time really, really wonderful care facilities and unique structures, creative and innovative structures for dementia care, and caregiver support. Many things that are coming about all the time. So definitely don't read this and just feel fear. Read this and say, okay, I have this information so that I can plan, so that I can think about it, so that I can find resources, and feel confident that you will find the resources that you will need, that they will be there for you. And then, let me just go back 1 second onto this. I just want to make sure I covered everything here. Okay, yeah, there was one thing I thought I missed. So one thing I just wanted to say, which is actually a little bit about palliative care, hospice care, and these stages of dementia. I think it's a really important question, and that is, if you get to the point where if somebody asks you, would you be surprised if your loved one died in the next year? And you say no, then that is a time that you should start thinking about hospice care. So with dementia, again, there are measurements that people use for dementia that are different than a regular, or not regular, but in other situations. So for dementia, because it is a chronic, longer term thing, it can be harder to measure when you're in the last 6 months of life. So they do look for weight loss, if you've lost more than 10% of your weight, if you're having more incontinence, if you've had more frequent falls or visits to the hospital, if your verbal ability has declined significantly, if you're unable to care for yourself, if eating has changed. All of those factors and combination of those factors is used to determine whether a dementia patient would qualify for hospice care or not. But I think this question is a simple way that you can kind of test yourself. And the question is, if your loved one was to die in the next year, would you be surprised? And if your answer to that is no, I wouldn't be surprised. If something were to happen in this coming year, I wouldn't be surprised, then that's a way that you know it's time to start to think about hospice care. And again, hospice care is a really wonderful, wonderful resource, and there are many amazing providers, and they are increasing all of the time as far as how they approach hospice and the gifts that they bring to the loved one and to the loved one's family. So I invite you to don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of asking for care for hospice or for palliative care. They are there for you, and they really do make a difference. Oh, and they're amazing people. People that go into those fields are people who've been called to go into those fields, and they're just really, really generous souls in my experience. So, all right. So now, one more piece of information, and that is to talk to you about advanced care planning. So I have up here this picture. This is the 5 wishes. It is an example for you. It is an example of an advanced care plan. So I'm sure you've heard this term, but I will go over it a little bit just so that we're all on the same page. So an advanced care plan is where you have outlined what your wishes are for your death. So, and what are specific things that you want to say, that you want to request, that you want to communicate around your wishes for your end of life. And the 5 wishes, this example that I have here, is, I think, just a good example because it has 5 questions, whereas some advanced care plans will cover like do not resuscitate, that kind of thing. but it won't cover a lot of the complexities that we face these days when it comes to end of life, especially with dementia. So something like the 5 wishes or another advanced care plan that is a little bit more robust, I feel is really worth it, really worth taking the time to fill it out. And I'm thinking that what I will do, because I think it would be really helpful, is I'll do a separate video specifically on filling out the 5 wishes as an example of how to complete an advanced care plan, just in case there are more questions. But the main thing is that, of course, they have this saying that it's a gift for you and it's a gift for those you love. When you complete the 5 wishes, you're going to feel better, and also you're giving a gift to the people that you love because you're going to help them know what your wishes are. Now, if we're thinking about our loved one with dementia, there would be 2 things. If it's in early stages of dementia, then you want to try to encourage them to think about completing an advanced care plan and have that conversation with you as early as possible, so that as things progress, you've already got that documentation, you've already had those conversations, and you can uphold them. If they are in a more advanced stage of dementia, and they are maybe not able to complete a 5 wishes for themselves, you can still refer to the document and reflect on it, I think, and maybe as a family, it just gives you a way to have conversations around what the wishes might be. And those can be difficult conversations to have without some kinds of triggers. So having a document like this is just something that you could use as a tool in that case. So the 5 wishes are on the front of this book here. And the first one is, the person I want to make care decisions for me when I can't. So this is designating a healthcare agent or a healthcare proxy or a healthcare power of attorney. all this different names, but all are the same thing. Having a healthcare proxy, a healthcare agent, a healthcare power of attorney. These are all people, same person, same thing. A person who has been designated legally to make health care decisions for you when you are not able to do so. And the thing that I will say about choosing a healthcare agent is generally it should not be the same person as your financial power of attorney. That's recommended, that you have 2 different people who are, one is financial power of attorney, one is healthcare power of attorney. And it kind of makes sense because there are often different skills needed. Not only is it just help keep things more clean as far as who has jurisdiction over really important parts of your life, but there are also different skills needed. I mean, if there's somebody who, like for myself, I definitely was involved in the health side of my mom's care, and I wanted to be there, I wanted to go to appointments, I wanted to help navigate that and advocate for her. I wasn't really not that interested in the financial power of attorney. Luckily, one of my sisters had that role and did it wonderfully, and we were able to divide our responsibilities that way. So, so that's the first recommendation. The second is when you're thinking about who to choose, it's not necessarily automatic that it should be your spouse or your child or a family member. You want it to be someone who can advocate for you and respect your wishes in the most difficult of circumstances. And so that might be your spouse, it might be a child, it might be your best friend, or it may be someone else. And so it's a tricky thing, and I just invite you to think, like, don't just jump to a conclusion. And again, I can give my example that I found it very difficult, that it could be very difficult if I were put in a position for my mom, if she wanted to, like if she were on life support or whatever, and I had to make the decision to pull her off life support. It's very difficult. She had to make that decision for my father, which she did. but it's a very difficult decision to make. So you need to make sure that the person is going to have the emotional fortitude and the commitment to upholding your wishes, even in the most difficult of circumstances. You also most likely want to pick someone who lives close to you, or if this is for your loved one, is in the same geographic location as your loved one, because it's very helpful if the person, the healthcare proxy agent, can be physically present, because so much happens in a room, in a hospital room, in a end of life situation that's just there physically. And if someone is remote or can't get there in time, it might make things more difficult. So that's just some things to consider when choosing healthcare agent. And I think I will, again, when I think about doing this other video, and I'll go into that more deeply, more specifically. There's a lot to talk about when preparing an advanced care plan, which we're not going to cover everything today. Oh my goodness, I'm really running late. Okay, so then the second question here, the second wish, is the kind of medical treatment that I want or don't want. And so that's where you're going to outline specifically, if you want to have technology, if you want to have life support, if you want pain medication, if, like, how comfortable do you want to be versus how alert. So that's kind of the spectrum you have to choose between. Do I want to have do I want to have no pain, even if it means I'm not going to be aware of who's with me? Or do I want to be aware of who's with me, even if I'm in pain? Or where on that spectrum do I fall? So that's going to provide some examples in the book of how to word it, so it can give you some prompts, and you can just copy the wording that they have, or you can write your own. The third wish is how comfortable I want to be. And that's where you can expand a little bit on specific things that make you comfortable, and it could be simple, like I want to have my mouth kept moist, and I want to have my teeth brushed, and I want to have my hair washed, and but it could also be I want to have certain music played. I want to be able to have animals visit me in my room. I want to have whatever, like anything, whatever it is that makes you comfortable, right? What would that be? And how I want people to treat me. Again, that is just a kind of about your care. And then the last one is what I want my loved ones to know, which is where you can actually take some time and communicate some messages. So in the 5 wishes, it was actually designed by the lawyer who traveled with Mother Teresa, who was the Catholic nun who did a lot of care for the poor, and ended up caring for a lot of end-of-life situations for the poor. And this lawyer was with her and witnessed all of that, and realized and heard and saw Mother Teresa helping them to communicate, regrets, or, forgiveness, or expressions of love, or gratitude, or whatever, these things that they wished to communicate before they died. And so that's what that last wish is, the opportunity to do. So, my goodness, I have covered a lot today, and I am at my 45 minutes. I am not going to go into all of the details on that. So I wanted to just close with a couple of resources for you. So I had the Go Wish game, and then I have also, like, here's the 5 wish document that I have here, but I put it up there. And then I have a book. So this was a book that's called The Force of Character by James Hillman, and it's really wonderful. It covers lots of different categories, and again, it's organized really nicely. It's kind of a little bit more conversational than the book I mentioned in the previous class, which is the 36-hour day. But this one is more conversational, more personal, and he talks kind of about emotions and stories and like about aging, not specifically about dementia, but I think that it's really relevant and it's a nice read. I found that this is a very supportive book to read. And then, of course, A Took a Wand, Being Mortal, which I mentioned in the first or the second class, which is a really great book. And he's a doctor, and he's also sharing his experience and perspective, which he does very well. So that's a really great book. And then specifically about dementia, and we'll talk about this also in the next class. And this is called Alive Inside. And this is about the impact of music on people with dementia and how, as the brain is going, the very last piece is our musical memory. And so even if someone is not able to talk with us, they can still be reached through music. And so this movie actually documents that, where people that were not really responding in other ways, they realized if they played music for them, they got responsive, and it's really beautiful. So, all right, so that is it for my resources for today. So I hope that this was helpful. I know it was a lot of information. Please do put any comments or questions that you have down below, and let me know if there are things that were unclear or that you would like me to follow up on. Next week, we will have the last two classes, which are oh yeah, my favorite is Caring for Yourself. So the 6th class will be all about supporting you. So I'm going to bring in all the tools that I can to support you as a caregiver, how to make, what are ways that you can be loved and cared for, balance your life, and honor your role as a caregiver. So that's going to be all at next Sunday at 3 o'clock. And then next Sunday at 5 o'clock, again, it's an encouragement. It's called Encouragement Treasure. And we will be putting all of this together and kind of making sure that you're able to take this information that we've covered in these classes and put them into a system and into an action plan or framework that feels good and is useful to you. So that's what we're going to do. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next Sunday.